Jude, if you go to the bottom left of your screen, click on your video.
Yeah, we're live.
Are you ready? Everyone good?
Yeah.
Okay, let's make a start. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the third We Need to Talk panel, part of a week of digital events here on YouTube curated by the Royal Exchange Theatre. I'm Nickie Miles-Wildin. I am a white woman. I have short brown hair that's shaved at the sides, bleach blonde on top, though due to lockdown my roots are badly coming through. I am wearing a green t-shirt. Behind me there's a window, to my right, your left, with bookshelves and an orange cushion to the other side. I am Associate Director at Graeae Theatre Company and former resident assistant director at the Royal Exchange as part of the Regional Theatre Young Directors Scheme. My relationship with the Royal Exchange, I think, started as I came up to assist on the House of BERNARDA ALBA. So for me, coming all the way up to Manchester from Gloucestershire in 2017 has really started a great collaborative relationship with the Royal Exchange Theatre. I've been invited to chair this conversation, which has been inspired by the Royal Exchange and Graeae's co-production of the House of BERNARDA ALBA. It was directed by Graeae's artistic director, Jenny Seeley, and this production was firmly inspired by Graeae's mission to boldly place deaf and disabled actors centre stage and challenge those preconceptions around disability. The result was a beautiful, contemporary adaptation of Lorca's powerful play about women, mothers and daughters, an overwhelming desire to be listened to, and the need for change, all of which seems incredibly relevant today. I also have to say, it had an all-female creative team. So yeah, women ruled. Anyway, coronavirus has had a huge impact on us all, but some groups of people have been feeling that impact more than others. From the outset of this pandemic, the impact on deaf and disabled people has been devastating. In a recent article published on Disability Rights UK, co-chairs of the Disability Charities Consortium said, "It feels like the UK's 14 million disabled people, particularly those with physical conditions, are being forgotten and allowed to fall through the cracks." That goes from the lack of British Sign Language interpreters in the government briefings, to unclear information regarding shielding, shortfalls in public services that are seeing a bigger demand than ever before, and the delays in the delivery of much needed food and medication. And that's not to mention those feelings of loneliness and isolation for those shielding alone and away from family. Theatre and the arts can play an important role in helping to amplify these issues, and it brings important stories to light and remind people that we are not forgotten. At a time that I want to be making theatre, I want to make art to protest about these issues that we're facing, I am unable to make it in the way that I am used to. My work is now having to happen online, and that's a way to keep connected and feel like I'm making a change, keeping the disabled narrative and the disabled voices out there, that we are not being forgotten. We can't be forgotten. Before COVID and lockdown, we had started to see a shift in the arts in particular. Deaf and disabled actors on mainstream stages such as the RSC, the National, Sheffield Crucible, and right here at the Royal Exchange. We were involved in discussions around improving access for audiences at major venues. Disabled writers forming relationships with regional theatres with potential commissions. We basically felt like we had and starting to have places at the table, be part of the wider arts world. But many of us now ask, what are the chances that those places will still be there when all this is over? Today, I am delighted that we are joined by three fantastic guests to talk about how lockdown has disproportionately affected disabled people across the UK And what does theatre need to do to make space for this community in the future? I'm joined by Natalie Amber, actress and theatre maker, advocate and campaigner who has served for 6 years on Equity's Deaf and Disabled Committee. Also, Aarian Mehrabani, who Aarian was a member of the Exchange Young Company and has recently graduated as an actor at the Central School of Speech and Drama. I'm also joined by actor Hermon Berhane, deaf actor and activist who has appeared at the Royal Exchange in the House of BERNARDA ALBA and most recently a 4-star fantastic production of Cutting It. Can't remember who the director was on that. We are also joined by BSL interpreters Jude Mahon and Sarah Glendenning. I'm going to invite each panellist to talk about their thoughts on today's question, and then I'll open the discussion out to questions from viewers through the comment section on YouTube, or you can also ask us questions through Twitter at RXTheatre. And you can join the conversation through the hashtag RXConnect. I'll try and get through as many questions as I can. Firstly, I'd like to invite Hermon to share her thoughts with us. Thank you, Hermon.
So, yeah, my name's Hermon Berhane. Obviously, I'm black and I am wearing a blue top and I've got a white background behind me. So I was, as a deaf person, I have been severely impacted by Corona-19, especially my theatre making, my theatre work. And lockdown, wow, that has really changed my life recently. There's a lot of things that I was doing that I've had to stop. And I've become, I think overwhelmed is a word that I would use with the things that are going on. Because in normal, if you can say normal, everyday today life, I've accessed barriers as a deaf person, access to deaf people. So to information from the government briefings, that just hasn't been there because the interpreters haven't been provided. So I've not really been clear about what's been going on. And the information has been really important, obviously, to everybody, especially the deaf community. And where's our equality? So I've not really been sure what's been going on myself. I don't know whether I'm allowed out, whether I've got to stay home. So I've had all that baggage going on, all those issues going on. And the government have seemed to be ignoring the deaf community at the moment. So, and there's been, I've seen, from what I've seen, there's been a lot of deaths, which has quite worried me. So I think if we talk about how we can work in the future, I mean, so far, I think I've been on Zoom 20 or 30 times because all my work is having to go online now. And technology obviously is really useful, especially as a deaf person. But if you're trying to lip read on a Zoom conversation, it becomes impossible. It is exhausting. And then when you're trying to work with interpreters, especially with online media, the interpreters are in a really small screen. So I've had to adjust myself and get used to working in 2020 online. So how I see the future, or how I don't see the future, I don't know. I've got some anxiety because disabled or deaf, how people are using these opportunities in lockdown, I don't think that's been appropriate. There's no social adjustment for deaf and disabled people. We're still in the same situation we have been for years. We've all been activists. We've worked so hard to campaign and fight for everything that we've achieved so far. And then this happened. So I think we more than other people have had to adjust to it. And obviously what the timetable is going to be in the future, I don't know. And it's what we need and the support that we need that I feel is sadly lacking. And access, I mean, what do we even say about access now in the times that we're going through? I think that's it, Nickie.
Great, thank you. A lot there, and thank you for your honesty. Definitely about, I think what's really touched me is that idea of how deaf community felt left out beforehand due to lack of communication, but now that communication gap has widened, like you say. where is that information coming from, those briefings?
Yeah, I feel that there isn't any information. I think that we have just been cast to one side. We're seen as nothing, we're seen as worthless.
And do you think, how were you feeling with regards to your work in theatre before the pandemic? You had been in Cutting It, you were also in Sheffield at the Crucible. So for you, it felt like your career was, you're really hitting those mainstream stages.
I mean, it's suddenly come to a stop, and I feel quite low about that. I was chatting to my sister recently about the long-term plans and how we see the future. And I don't think we're going to be coming back anytime soon. And obviously I've got concerns about that, because how can we support each other in this time of a pandemic? How can we become stronger? How can we work together? So for me, I'm frightened. That is a word I'm going to use. I'm frightened.
So thinking about the future of theatre after this pandemic, you say you're frightened. What is it that we can ask theatres to do to support you with that?
I mean, we have set up an email group, so we have been actively asking for support. And I think we've just got to start on our whole journey again, reiterating why it is important to include deaf and disabled people. And remember that we are here. We've just got to remind people that we are here, especially in theatre with the directors. We've got to inform the directors, you know, we're still here. We can't go back to what it once was.
Yeah, agree with that.
I mean, and obviously networking is really important, because I'm quite lucky. I do have a lot of networks, a lot of people I can contact, but just reminding people that we're still here, we're still around, I feel is really important. Because at the moment, the campaign, I mean, we had a campaign recently.
We shall not be removed.
We should not be removed. Yeah, exactly, Nickie. Thank you. We should not be removed. And I think that is still an integral part, but I don't want to see us going back to the beginning of that campaign.
Mm-hmm. So we can't go back to those, can't go back on the progress we've made. Okay, cool. Thank you, Hermon. Thank you very much. Natalie, I'd like to bring you in here. It'd be great to hear about your experiences as both a performer and indeed an equity committee member.
Hey, Nickie, thank you. Give you a bit about me and how I look. I look a shaggy mess is what the answer is at the minute. So I'm styling a real COVID shaggy bob haircut. That is the colours out of the bottle. So it says it's mango, but it's like it's like a gingery red. And I'm wearing a white shirt, and I have a choker on, which has got, oh my God, I forgot what the hand's called. It's got another nice hand hanging off it. So I think I'll start with a bit backstory before COVID and my experience in the industry. So when I started out my career, I did not have a disability. I acquired it a few years in. And what shocked me when I had to join back in the industry, I was now in a wheelchair, and the difference in the way people treated me was shocking. I felt slightly guilty that I'd never actually thought about how inclusive or not inclusive our industry was. I was very much aware of the deaf community not being included, but I think I was quite ignorant to the rest. I thought we were more than we are. So rather than get frustrated about it, I kind of set on a mission to try and change it, to try and understand where the barriers are and how we can do it, which is why I joined Equity Deaf and Disabled Committee. And I'm not going to lie, it's been 10 years. It's been like a hard slog battle of, it's always disabled people fighting for disabled people with no allies attached. And I feel like in the last 4 years, I think we've, like Nickie, you've kind of spoken about, we've started to make real progress. We've started getting allies in non-disabled creatives, whether it's casting directors, whether it's directors, going, all right, this is not right. We really have very little representation in our mainstream industry. What can we do to help? And those conversations that have started have been so crucial, because it's always, what's always been missing is having disabled voices in the room, having disabled voices in the, whether that's as associate director, whether that is as a director, we need to be in those rooms to help influence change. And that was starting to happen. We were, you know, across the board as well. So I was seeing it in TV and film, and I, instead of just having the one audition a year that was very stereotypical wheelchair user that had no depth to the character, I started to get a little bit more incidental casting where it wasn't about a chair. I actually played a mum while a character or something, which is what was great about House of BERNARDA ALBA. I mean, I played a maid. Like, we turned my wheelchair into a walking maid caddy, which was amazing. But for me, the fear now is that we have, I think we're on a course that we can either, the industry goes, we move forward, but we have to move forward with all our allies behind us, or we're going to go backwards, because I feel since COVID, for me, there's so much uncertainty and anxiety. I've had projects cancelled. I've had some projects put on, some TV projects have been put on hold, but sort of indefinitely. And I'm like, well, am I going to be put back? Am I going to be recasting that? Or they just get rid of that because that was only a tiny role and they're not really, it's more effort than it's worth. And I think my biggest fear is also there's been so many cuts already to care that's being provided for anyone that's got any kind of impairment from social services or wherever you get that from. My own experience is like I've literally just got the basics of support. So someone will come in and help me get dressed, and then they'll come back in the evening, and then maybe once a week I can get out to have food, and then also I now have to contribute 3 times more to my care package than what I did just before COVID. And so my question is, well, so how many disabled people are not in a financial state to fund that? I'm not in a financial state to fund that, so I literally have to choose what I do. So creatively, it's really shut me down in a lot of aspects. And I feel the whole disabled community as a whole has just been kind of left in the gutter. It's kind of, we've been dehumanized. You know, on care packages, we're seeing people that have got autism or learning disabilities, they have been put an automatic DNR if they get admitted to hospital with COVID, because they've been labelled as being fragile on their care package. So if they suddenly get ill, they've got no power of attorney or anything, and they'll just look at the simple sheet, oh, they're fragile, well, we'll not save them, just leave them without any help, doesn't matter. And it's like, we don't matter. And I just think it goes beyond disgusting. It goes beyond disgusting, because it's like we're just being eliminated. And that's what scares me with the industry, I think, going forward, because the state of theatre, when we do go back financially, is going to be in a struggle. So my fear is the first thing that's going to go is any access provision. And the government, for me, has to help support the industry. And the only way we're going to get that is it can't just be disabled people asking the government to do that. It needs to be the whole industry together and us working together in order to change that. So there's a lot of uncertainty, I think. I think the one plus thing, in a way, that we've been forced online and we've been forced to Zoom is it's shown that we can work in very different ways. And does that open possibilities in the rehearsal room? You know, if everyone can't physically get in a space on one day, can we do Zoom, which can help people even with childcare issues? So it spans way beyond just being about disability. What helps us actually helps people wider. So I think there are some positive provocations that could be used if people take them up and moving forward. But there's just a lot of uncertainty, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think the things that you say there is that there's that fear that we're more effort than we're worth. You know, when I think something about with regards to access to work, I think it's about everybody being seen now as what your economic value is. And just for people watching, the economic value of disabled people is that for every £1 that is spent on access to work, we give back £1.48 into the economy. I think as disabled people, we bring in a disposable income of something like £80 billion. So we do have an economic worth, most definitely. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that to me, it does feel like it becomes that. It's that survival of the fittest. Once again, eugenics, if I dare say that. Not that I want to go and see loads of plays about eugenics when we get out of this. Please, theatres, do not do that.
No, let's not go there.
Let's not go there unless they're really interesting sci-fi ones. I think it's that thing about, are we more effort than we're worth? No, we're not. The financial state and also what you said, really interesting about different ways of working. As disabled people, we have been doing this for quite a long time, but nobody has listened to us in that sense that I need to work from home today. And now everybody's jumped on that bandwagon. And it's like, well, yeah, I agree with you, Nat. It's like now people have seen how easy it can be. Let's bring it and make it accessible and okay, as it were. And also just thinking of me, like, I don't want to have to keep traveling from Manchester to London when I can quite easily do my work over Zoom or any other particular platform. So I think it's about, looking at what is necessary, isn't it? Do we all need to be in that room? Or what's the equal footing of people in that room? And that we do work in very different ways. There are different levels of communication. And also, and I don't know, Hermie, about you saying about lip reading, but I find that it takes such concentration to be on Zoom. It is exhausting. So now I just really hope that non-disabled people go, oh, this is how exhausting it is for deaf people to have to lip read. This is how exhausting it is for a visually impaired person to have to navigate an area. That it does show that actually things take a certain level of concentration that maybe non-disabled people had really thought about. You said something interesting there about allies as well.
Yeah,
which I think is really important in the industry, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because I get really frustrated that, because I think as disabled people we can fight as much as we want to fight, but at the moment we're not important enough as far as the wider society is concerned. So unless we have non-disabled allies backing us and going, okay, this is what we need and this is not right. Like what you were saying about access to work, Nickie, access to work when it works is brilliant.
Yeah.
But at the minute, when it comes to self-employed, it's really patchy and dodgy to say the least, and it doesn't work. The whole thing needs reforming. For so many access needs, like interpreters have got a cap on it. So does that mean you can only work half the year because, unless that or your whole wage is going on your interpreter? And at the minute, like for me, if I can't get access to work for a certain job that I've only been given a week's notice and I've got to film the next week, and then my care support is coming out of my budget. And I think people don't think about that. And I think it's having discussions with companies that you're working for. I think it's getting together and, like I said, putting pressure on the government that the whole thing needs reform. I think the whole way the system works, whether it's employment support allowance through to access to work, it all needs reform because it doesn't help aid people to work. And surely the end game point is to help us to work.
Clues in the title, innit?
Yes, slightly, ever so slightly. Just, I mean, the whole ridiculousness of access to work is actually, I didn't find out about access to work till 7 years into being disabled. So that's how much they don't advertise it.
I wonder then if there's something there about the future of theatre going forward. It's about theatres being aware of these government schemes, of making sure that they are inviting us as disabled people to have these discussions, not us having to go to them and knock on their doors that have ridiculously high door knockers, if you want to use that term of how can we even get in the building if we can't even knock on your door anyway. So I think it's about theatres having to really be there and have those open door policies and come to us rather than us feel like we have to keep going to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Nat. That was great and really brilliant to bring in that thing of care packages changing. I think that's interesting for the industry to be aware of that and to think about what hours people can work and when they can work.
Yeah, I just quickly, Nickie, before you go, I think because the one thing we need to not do is there become a prejudice within the disabled community around what kind of disabilities theatres employ.
Yeah.
So not going for people with easy access. I think that's what we need to try and
you
avoid.
go for the best person for the job, don't you?
Yeah.
And you make it
work.
I want to say establishment. You make your building work for that person. Yeah. It's that come to us, we'll come to you, meet halfway.
Yeah.
Cool.
Totally.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you very much. And now, Aarian, I mean, you've just graduated from Central School of Speech and Drama, previously in the Young Company. What has been your experience so far in the industry?
So yeah, just a bit of AD quickly. I've got tan skin. I've got a pathetic bit of facial hair, and very long or semi-long shaggy black hair that's been growing out since January. So yeah, in terms of the industry, it's been a weird one because I'm visually impaired, and surprisingly and shockingly, myself and another guy that's in my graduating class, we're the first two visually impaired actors to have ever been trained at a conservatoire. And that is quite shocking because it's partly because drama schools and institutions are scared to train visually impaired actors. It's partly because the industry just doesn't have a need for it. And then when you as a young disabled person, watch theatre or watch TV and film, and you can't see disabled actors on your stages, and all you see, in a way, if you do see them, is them playing their disability and them talking about their disability. It's like, well, why would I want to? This isn't a career path I could fathom being in. It's a lot of doors are closed quite early on. So it's been whilst training, it's been an interesting one in terms of trying to ease the industry open and figure out where my place in the industry is. And it did, like you said, Nickie, at the start, we were starting to get a seat at the table and everything was starting to happen. And then now everything's just sort of like slammed shut. But actually, like what I've sort of like, the industry side of it is a side that is something that we need to have discussions within the industry about how we're going to come out of this stronger and how we're not going to revert back. But I think what has been at the forefront of my mind over the past 3 months or however long this has been is, like we've said, I think the word I'd use is it's a shame, because I'm just going to quickly go over, there's for those of you that don't know, there's a few models of disability, and I'm going to probably do an awful job of describing it, but there's medical model and other models which are that it's, you've got a disability, great, we're going to try and fix you. You've got a broken leg, we're going to try and fix you, and it's there's something wrong with you and we need to fix you in order to make you fit in with society. Then there's a social model, which is a really useful way to think about disability, and which completely opened my mind when I first heard it, which is that it is society that disables people. It's the fact that if you're a wheelchair user, that access to a building is only via stairs. It's the stairs that disable you rather than your actual disability. It's the fact that when I go into a restaurant, I can't read the menu or can't access the menu. That is the thing that disables me. And we've lived in a world for however long that is inherently ableist and is inherently very difficult for disabled people to survive in, essentially, and be viewed as people. And what has had to happen because of lockdown is that we have all had to drastically change the way we live our lives. We've all had to, both in lockdown, but now as we ease out of lockdown, the government keeps talking about this new normal, and we've had to adjust to a new normal. Now, this, in theory, is a perfect point in history to make this new normal, where everyone is having to change the way they live to make the new normal a more accessible normal. Problem is, it's gone the other way, and the world has become so much more inaccessible. I have to acknowledge my privilege that I am currently staying with my parents. I've stayed with my parents for the past 3 months. I moved back up north in March from London. So I haven't had to go out and do shopping and stuff like that. But talking to visually impaired people that have had to do that, when you go into a shop and all the things to keep people 2 meters apart, or the one-way systems, things like that, they're all visual. They're all visual signs. There's no way for a visually impaired person to know. There's no way for a visually impaired person to know that there's a queue outside a shop, or that there's 2 meters queuing. And there are so many stories which are not being broadcast on the news of visually impaired people, or disabled people in general, facing so much abuse because they just don't know that these systems are in place. Similarly, with when the 2 meter rule is being discussed, and when it was being discussed as to whether to bring it down to a meter, the only discussions that were happening were with regard to commerce and the economy. But what was never mentioned in that discussion is the fact that, for instance, as a visually impaired person, you miss out in general on a lot of things because a lot of conversation is body language. When you then go to a meter apart, you miss out on way more. You go to 2 meters apart, it's so much more difficult to communicate. Those things aren't considered. It's also the case that when walking around, it's very difficult for visually impaired people or other disabled people to maintain proper social distancing. And what has happened is that people, instead of seeing a guide dog or seeing a cane and going, okay, I should probably move, or I should probably keep 2 meters because they can't, a lot of disabled people are facing a lot of abuse. We already faced a lot of abuse, but we're facing a lot more abuse. And I still don't think it's too late. I think this is the perfect opportunity to, while we're all having to adjust, to change the way that we live our lives in a more accessible way. I think it's starting to slip away, that great opportunity, but it's not. I don't think it's gone yet.
No, I agree. And I think something that you said there, I'm just like, oh, theatres in the future, if we are having to social distance in theatres, then think about what signage they're putting out to integrate that 2 meter or that 1 meter rule. I think that's brilliant what you've hit on there, Aarian. It is about, don't just think it has to be visual signage. How are these theatres gonna change to include everybody when we go back? And also, I think it's really interesting that you talk about, sorry, Hermie, I will come to you in one moment. I think it's really interesting you say about visually impaired people unable to judge that sort of social distancing. I feel really vulnerable when I go out in my wheelchair. I went out for the first time in 13 and a half weeks on Sunday. I mean, only down to Nome Island on Salford Keys, but it felt like I was like let out. But there's still that feeling of vulnerability that I can't move as easily. I can't navigate the pavements or the roads as easily as a non-disabled person. What if someone comes over me, coughs over me, splutters over me? There is a real fear of that being vulnerable, isn't there? And also, I know at the moment it's particularly like you as a visually impaired person, Hermie as a deaf person, but I've recently worked the piece of work with a deaf-blind artist, and for deaf-blind community are being left out, really left out with any information coming through, and they're the people that rely on touch to communicate with carers, with their loved ones, but there's not been that much information passed on to them. So yeah, Hermie, your hand went up.
The mask situation, you know, for deaf people wearing the mask, how do they communicate? Because the lip reading, when the mask covers the face, we just cannot communicate like that. We need them to pull it down slightly to say what needs to be said to us, to like, so we know what's been said, and then we can put the mask back up. But interpreters, you know, if they have to wear masks, you know, it's not only lip pattern, but it's also the facial expression that we can't read, that is all about the communication. It's a really difficult situation, and it's difficult for everyone. We all have to adapt to this. You know, I know people aren't going to want to pull down their mask to communicate, but that is just a little example of those additions that we will have to make. So just move the mask, communicate, put it back up.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. And also, how is that going to affect when we go into buildings, into a theatre? Are people still going to have to wear masks? How are we going to communicate? Theatre's going to be able to afford, you know, the mask with the plastic windows around mouths. If anybody wants to know what Hermy means, then try and take a selfie wearing a mask. It all has to come through your eyes. You can't communicate it. Do you know what I mean? There's such a difference when your mouth is covered up. So yeah, just think about that. Theatres, masks so that people can see people lip reading. How are we going to be guided through theatres? I worry about even getting public transport, being as a wheelchair user, and that person at the train station putting the ramp out for me that usually hold the back of my chair so I don't tip back. How are they going to do that with a really long stick? That's not going to be safe. What if you're a visually impaired person and you need to take that person's arm to get to the train? What if you're visiting the theatre, taking an usher's arm to find a seat? How is that going to work? And I think, Aarian, you hit on this perfect thing around this new normal. Before I go to a question, because there has been one come up in chat, give me 3 things from each of you of what you would love this sort of new normal to look like. Particularly, let's put it in relation to theatre. Anyone like to go first, or should I chuck mine out? My new normal is that I just think buildings take this time to think about how inaccessible they are, and they spend a bit of time thinking about if we do have to socially distance in auditoriums, what that access is going to look like, what the access is into their buildings, and also potentially, because I think one of my fears is that we'll revert back to what work venues are putting on. We'll revert back to that like really dull stuff, and things that involve. I have heard a conversation where it's been debated, do people really want to see disabled people on their stages when we come back from a pandemic? So that is something that, you know, we're fighting for. So my new normal would be, hell yeah, we want to see as many disabled people on their stages as we possibly can. We want to see disabled people running those buildings as well and creating work for those stages. So my new normal is that it becomes more accessible than it ever has been. Anyone else like to pick up on that? Nat?
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Nickie. I think because one of my fears is the whole, like you said, okay, well, we're going to revert back to doing safe work that we know is going to fill the theatre, which does not involve us, because, you know, we don't want to scare the audience that we've got disabled people on the stage. So my fear, my want for them is to look at access, not just in terms of what's around the theatre and how people can get into the theatre, what's on your stage. You know, look at creative ways to make your work accessible. You know, there's so much with 3D projection going on, with captioning going on. I mean, BERNARDA was a great example of that. You know, you can put audio description, you can put BSL into a production, and it's far more creative, and you make it then accessible for the deaf community to come to any performance they want to, or the visually impaired community to come to any performance they want to. And I want to look at ways that how we can build on that, but how we can educate people on how to create that work. And I think the learning side of things for people and having us in the room to help that evolve and develop. That's my want for going forward. I think let's use this time, let's take it, let's rewrite the rules, and let's include us, but include us by asking us and involving us, and us being, like you said, Nickie, in higher positions. Because I'm tired of when everyone talks about diversity, when I hate that word in full, just because it drives me bloody potty. Put us all in nice little groups. And sorry, I swore, really sorry. But anyway, disability gets left off that list. I mean, the amount of times, like, you've heard the Oscars or you've heard whatever, and it's like, well, we've not seen these people in the top 5. And I was like, well, when was the last time you saw a disabled person down a red carpet? So I think for me, building on what you said, really, but also people looking at creative ways that they can improve their technique and their access.
Cool, thank you, Nat. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Disability is really intersectional. And jumping on Aarian's use of social model there, where I've come now, instead of saying non-disabled, I'm going to start referencing everybody as pre-disabled, because everyone's going to become disabled at some point in life, whether that's through old age or through an accident.
Yeah.
So, and I think if you say you're pre-disabled, puts people in a different mindset. Oh yeah, I might need to access this soon. Hermie, Aarian, what are your thoughts for this new normal?
So do we go?
Yeah, I'll get Hermie first, then I'll come back to you, Aarian. Yeah, I'm with Hermie. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Okay, I think I was saying what I agree what Natalie was saying before. I think we all have to listen, you know, to what the needs are out there, and that's really important, because if we're looking at long term, we're looking at the future. It's so easy to disregard this. We could become preemers, but we've got to remember that we have got to fight this. This is an ongoing process. It's not going to go away. We have to be strong.
Yeah, we have to be strong. We have to be powerful. Aarian?
I essentially agree with everything that's been said, that it's a time that now when theatres and producing houses and big powerhouses that have a monopoly over the theatrical industry, they need to start taking responsibility for making sure that when they bring work back, that work is always accessible for audiences, but it's also accessible. And I think a mindset needs to be changed with regard to who we put on our stages and with regard to casting, because there's often and I've found this myself, a feeling of you go into an audition for something and a panel will go, yeah, but I really want to do this with my show, and you won't be able to do that. So I'm not, it's about thinking, opening up a dialogue as to what can you do, and not assuming, because assuming is the most damaging thing that someone can do. But then, like, it's about making sure that on our stages, the work that we make is dynamic and interesting and includes disabled people, not as disabled people, and not necessarily telling disabled stories, because that's really boring. Like, I've lived my life. I would put on an autobiographical show and just tour that for the rest of my career if that's what I wanted to do. I don't want to do that. I've trained as an actor. So I think it's about making sure that theatres and producing houses make sure that that is ready and waiting for when theatres reopen, for them to have that in their practice. And in the same way, the Arts Council is going to have to, and they are, completely relook at the way that they're giving out funding, because they just don't have the money to give out. And I think the Arts Council have already started doing this, or they had already started making sure that access was a part of a funding application, and they really thought about that. I think it's really important that it's an even more integral part of the new criteria for applying for Arts Council funding, and that will then force theatres and companies to make their work more accessible.
Okay, I just want to pick up on something on that. I kind of agree with what you're saying about not always playing disabled characters. I hear that, but I think the biggest challenge is actually to put the disabled narrative, the true disabled narrative out there that we know, out on the stages, because very much what we have at the moment is the non-disabled version of what they think the disabled narrative is, that it's inspiration porn, that me as a wheelchair user, I dream of walking or running through fields of gold. I do not. My aspiration is to run a theatre and be a bloody good director, actually. And at night time, I dream of nothing better than being chased by massive marshmallow men. Weird. But it is that thing of actually just going, let's put disabled narratives out there. It's not those narratives that we've currently got. It's about our lives and who we are. And being a disabled person always, I think, always kind of adds an element to whatever character you're playing. Let's not be afraid of being disabled.
Yeah.
Why not?
Happens. Like, you can play a character that just happens to have a disability.
Exactly.
I think it's also that thing of the work that is being made, and the work that theatres need to change their mindset in terms of who will come and see their work. Because if if a theatre thinks the only people that will come see work are a particular audience, that if we're going to see a disabled person on a stage, we want disability porn. Like, there's that mentality needs to change, because there are audiences that will want to see the truth, and they need to stop, I suppose, in a sort of crude way, stop inviting people into your theatre that want to see disability porn. Because is that really the sort of people, are those the sort of people that you want to be inviting into your building and telling stories to? It's, yeah.
Nat, very quickly, then I'm going to move on to
Very quickly. The other thing is taking a risk and putting us in lead roles. You know, if you want to put names in your theatre to get bums on seats, that's fine. Put them in the supporting roles, but don't make that as an excuse not to give us any lead roles. And I think people need to take a risk on that.
Cool. Hermie, quickly, did you have anything before we move on?
Yeah, we don't need to see tokenism. That's something that we don't need to see. Tokenism in 2020 needs to be gone. We need to move on from that. We need to see people with equal accessibility, with equality. So, you know, sometimes maybe people can attend a performance and can't understand what is going on. That needs to change. But tokenism definitely needs to be gone.
Yeah, I'm going to put that in room 101 with cripping up as well. Okay, moving on to questions. Should theatres be able to reopen without having a plan and actions in place, which means that deaf and disabled workforce and audiences can be part of reopening, and that those creation of plans should involve deaf and disabled people? Anyone want to answer that? I think we might have touched upon that.
Yeah, I don't think there's... I think the reality is theatres are going to face a little while before they reopen. So the question is, should theatres reopen without having those plans and conversations in place? That shouldn't happen, because even theatres should have been having those conversations for 3 months, but we've got probably a month and a while before theatres are allowed to reopen. You've got time. Like, that should not be a question that's ever really asked. Because if they are at a point where they haven't figured it out by the time that theatres are allowed to reopen, I think they then need to like take a look at themselves and think, we've had so much time, why are we not in a position where that can happen?
Yeah, agree. And also consult with deaf and disabled people as well on what that access should be.
Yeah, the people need to have that planning process in place. That should have happened ages ago, because, you know, we've been going on with this for some time now, so there's no excuse.
No excuse. Okay, question 2 is a lovely anecdote here about the exchange. So the SEN Schools Festival was an amazing experience for my son, who has complex special needs, and his school friends. He was so proud to see them perform on the Royal Exchange stage and celebrate that achievement with them. These are children that are rarely fully invited into these spaces, and this fully inclusive experience had a hugely positive impact, not only on him, but on us as a family. Many families have felt the isolation during lockdown with their children, but this is the common experience for families with disabilities. It is a vital lifeline for us, and the inclusive way in which the Royal Exchange have supported my son to access the Children's Company saw him perform and share creative experiences with other children, something I never thought I would see. I can't stress enough how much this has supported us as a family and our emotional well-being. How can we campaign to make sure these things continue in a fully accessible way? Nat, that feels like that could be an equity committee related question.
You reckon, Nickie? Oh, I don't know why. I'm always saying that, you know, education with our younger generation is so key, and I think actually it should be part of the fabric of every producing theatre that is out there, and it should be part of their outreach, because I think theatre has this unique ability to be accessible for everybody, no matter what your additional needs are. And it's a way to give children confidence, it's a way to help them with education, it's it's not about either. It's not even about the end game, them going into theatre. The end game is that they've got confidence to go into work. They've got confidence to think that they have a future, because in a lot of SEN schools, and even children that are stuck in mainstream but have additional needs, theatre and drama is left off the curriculum, because I think they kind of don't know what to either think that then it's not something that they can do without understanding the enormity that it can have on their education and the way that they are and they can grow as people. And I think we have a duty to society as theatre. That's part of the fabric of what theatre should be. It's, yes, what you produce on your stage, but it's also about supporting your local communities. And there is such a need in SEN schools that, and children in mainstream that are not getting properly educated in theatre should have a big part of that. And I really do think it should be in policy of part of their outreach. And I think going back to Aarian's point about Arts Council funding and any funding that they're getting, that should be part of the policy within that funding. If you put that into policy, they have to adhere to it. There's no get out of it. And so I think that is my stance on it at the minute. And I know it's something that we are looking at and have been looking at.
Yeah, I think it's also something about keep prodding theatres to do that work, keep writing those emails, particularly to the producers or the artistic directors of those buildings, and saying, when are you going to be doing this work? This is really important. Yeah, it is just that. And ask schools as well. Ask schools to be part of that. Write to your local MP. It's what we all have to do as deaf and disabled artists, and I think the more voices that we have on there, the better. And also I would check that if there is any theatre, and if you are running a theatre or an outreach department, that if you are choosing to work with a group of deaf or disabled young people, then you need to ask yourself, what is the legacy of this project? Please do not do it just as a tick box. I am bored of being a tick box. There's real legacy there. This work is vital to those young people's well-being and to your work as a venue as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to next question. How can the arts support the need for disability rights and equality more widely in the UK? Everyone takes us a big gasp of breath as we try to compose what to say. Would anyone like to kick us off? It's a big question, isn't it? Is it a can of worms?
I think it's a difficult one in terms of, I think, because I was thinking about this earlier actually, and the response, and I suppose taking the pressure off the arts and us as an industry, not necessarily taking the pressure off, but in terms of putting the pressure where it needs to be in society in terms of the government. Because we, as powerful as theatre is, there are certain systemic things that have to happen from a serious position of power. So I think it's about adjusting expectations, but at the same time, I was chatting to a friend the other day and she shared a quote with me that really resonated, and it's that thing of being the person or being the reason why somebody else feels seen or heard. And as a theatre and as the arts, putting people on our stages or putting people on our stages, presenting stories about deaf and disabled people, or even just making your building and making your shows more accessible, will make somebody feel seen and heard and give somebody a lease of life that you probably don't realize you're giving them. And I think it's so, it's so important that it's about the arts becoming a more inclusive place and not necessarily it being a big deal, because it's always made a massive deal. Stop making it a big deal.
You mean like pat yourself on the back if you've done something?
Essentially, yeah. Or going, we've got disabled people in this show, guys. This show's about disability. Look at it. It's like, is it a good show? Have you taken is it a show with good writing or good direction? Or have you, is it a show that I will want to see if I'm going to the National and the National has 3 shows on every night in their 3 theatres? If the only thing I hear about a show is disability, I'm like, do I want to go see that if I've not heard anything else around that show other than the fact that it's about disability.
Exactly, like it's a good show as well, worth a watch. It's 4 stars, 5 stars even. Nat, Hermie, anything you wanted to add in on that?
No, I really agree with Aarian. I think going back to I think theatres, if you make yourself more inclusive as a place, as a venue, if the people that are on your stage and the stories that you are telling are very genuine, and like Hermie's tokenistic, they're not tokenistic, and these characters have depth, and it's incidental casting and it's quality work, because I hate that notion of, well, we'll just shove a whole disabled show on, we don't really care about the quality, because then we get associated with bad quality, and that's the attitude people get around disability as it is. But I also think that it is bigger than theatres, so it is a very much a government level, because they both feed into each other. If you don't have the support from the government in helping with schemes such as access to work and supporting the theatre industry to help produce that work and put it on. So I agree with Aarian, it's two-handed, I think.
Good. Hermie, anything you want to add in?
Yeah, I agree totally with what both speakers have said there. Experience is really important within the deaf and disabled community, that it is completely inclusive. Maybe, Nickie, you remember this. We were trying to encourage a deaf actor to be in a play, and the person said, oh, there's a deaf person. No, the deaf person said, I can't do that, I can't do it. And then they did the performance, and there was a card. Sorry, Sarah, have you got this? Sorry, no, I've got you on a small screen. Sorry. No, I'm not getting it. Okay, carry on. Sorry, I can't get Hermie on a big screen.
Can we spotlight Hermie for one moment, please, so Jude can interpret? Is that possible? Tech.
So Hermie's just saying, I'll just read it from here.
Okay.
Hermie's saying that she received a letter saying, I've been proven wrong because I've never seen a deaf person on stage before. I just thought immediately it wasn't a possibility. And they realised themselves that they'd had this negative.
Keep going, Hermie, so Jude can see you. Keep going.
So at the same time, I thought, oh, that's brilliant that attitude has been changed. But then I felt really negative as well, like, oh, come on. This is where we're at. This, look at the year that we're in. It's this inequality that's there. We just need to be given the same space and the same opportunity.
And I think, yeah, picking up, I just think, how can the arts support the need for disability rights and equality more widely in the UK is to see it as equal footing as everyone else, and to really think about, use that term pre-disabled. I think you're going to want to have access sometime in your life, so I think as well, sign up to Equity, see what the work of the Equity Deaf and Disabled Committee are doing, look online, look at what's happening to independent living funds, educate yourselves around access to work, how that works. Do you have a designated member of your team that works specifically with access to work? And also this one, going forward in these times, access should be moved forward by disabled contractors, not non-disabled. I think particularly in reference to if you are looking at using audio description, bringing in a visually impaired person and a non-disabled person working together so they can feed off one another. The same with kind of integrated signing. So you get the kind of both two heads, working together on it. I think it's really important to have those disabled voices in the room. We've come to the end of our hour. Wow, I feel like a lot more that we could have talked about. I mean, to sum up, so thinking of about our question, wasn't it really, around what does theatre need to do to make space for disabled community in the future? I think it is a lot there around just check out what your new normal is going to be. Make sure that you are accessible. Think about working with deaf and disabled consultants on making your buildings accessible when we do come back, where we are allowed back into your buildings. What plays you're putting on. Don't go for the safe stuff. Switch your mindset around casting. Open up a dialogue with people. Don't just assume. Make your stages dynamic and interesting. Yeah, it's not rocket science. Let's be on it. We're not asking you to get the vaccine for the pandemic. Admittedly, that might be the only time some of us are allowed out and into your buildings. What we're asking you for is just a bit of common sense to keep our spaces at those tables. We might be a bit slower getting there due to having to shield, but just make sure our spaces are still there when we come back. Keep the dialogue going with us, even if it's virtually over Zoom. Don't shut us out. Don't push us back into the Victorian era where we were put on the street to beg or hidden away in attics. Let's keep us here, keep us going, keep our voices heard. So I just want to say thank you very much to our panel, to Natalie Amber, to Hermon Berhane, to Aarian as well for joining us, to Jude and to Sarah, our interpreters. And thank you to the viewers for joining us today. And just to remind you that you can watch The House of BERNARDA ALBA right here on the Exchange's YouTube channel from Monday the 29th of June. The next panel event is at 5 p.m. this Friday, and it asks, how does the way we tell stories and who tells them define us and our lived experiences? I've been Nickie Miles-Wildin. I'm signing out. Thank you once again for joining us.